We are very pleased to have you with us this afternoon, and we are very pleased to welcome you to the Climate Reality Project and the Climate Reality and the Climate Hub campaign, which is aiming to activate citizens in their cities to push for carbon neutrality across the country. We're going to find out more about that as the webinar rolls on. And in the meantime, we have a terrific speaker for you this afternoon by the name of Mr. Chris Dawson. Chris Adam at Dawson College. My name, however, is Matthew Chapman, and I'm the campaign coordinator here at Climate Reality Project Canada. Through several trainings each year, and I'm sorry I can't show you full screen just yet because of a technical difficulty, but through trainings like the one that I'm attending at the moment in Pittsburgh, I'm mentoring one of these tables at the moment, and Climate Reality offers these trainings several times a year to people who are passionate about getting active on climate change and learning the latest about the science and communication tools. So here we have 1,300 people in the LEED Platinum Pittsburgh Convention Center today. We're also helping through a campaign in Canada and rolling out across North America very soon, community climate hubs that will help raise the bar on climate action in Canadian cities while spurring ambition at the provincial and federal levels. This webinar, as you can see on your screen, is the 6th in our fall series. And you can sign up for the last of those webinars on waste management and eco-fiscal measures to price pollution at climatehub.ca, and that'll be with Andrew Duffield, pardon me, next week on Thursday. So today's webinar, as I mentioned, features Chris Adam and Véronique Paris, sustainability coordinators at Dawson College in Montreal, Quebec. Which is the largest CEGEP, the largest college in Quebec with over 11,000 students. Chris is an educator who's been recognized for his outstanding abilities in the fields of environmental education, both nationally and internationally. His expertise in communicating environmental issues to the public at large and engaging students in action projects that benefit the community is extensive. He is the executive director of the Earth Values Institute, a teacher within the Community Recreation and Leadership Training Program at Dawson College, and he directs the Sustainability Initiative at Dawson. I had the pleasure of meeting Chris a couple of years ago, and ever since we've crossed paths many times in our respective journeys, and he is a phenomenally inspiring individual. So I'm very happy to hand it over now to you, Chris. So thank you very much for joining us, and take it away.
Thank you. I would like to introduce...
Oh, you're muted, so you have to unmute.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Not just yet.
Okay, no. So that...
I'm sure he'd be saying something like, wonderful to be here, ladies and gentlemen. Great to be joining you from the hallways of Dawson College in Montreal, Quebec. The weather is balmy, 22 degrees, and there's a northeasterly that is blowing in off the mountain.
Okay, technical problem.
So we're getting there.
On mute.
Oh, you can hear him just fine. So I'm the one who can't hear you.
Okay.
Apparently. Great.
And
so you can keep going, perhaps.
I'm going to get on the screen. I'm going to put on share screen.
Outlier.
So I can't, I'm just going to make sure that screen comes up, and then I'll introduce.
If anybody else would like to make a comment in the comments section to let us know that, yeah. Okay, yeah, I think we're good. Go ahead, Chris.
We're okay. I'm going to introduce Véronique Paris very briefly, and then she can introduce some of her background. Véronique joined the Dawson facilities team 3 to 4 years ago.
4 years.
4 years ago, and has a background education in actually climate change work, and really happy to work with her as an environmental engineer as we further our initiative of carbon neutrality. That leads us into many other things I'll explain in a moment through the PowerPoint. So I'll just give the mic to Véronique for a moment, and she can give you a little bit of her background and experience in the field.
So right now I've been with Dawson for 4 years as the building maintenance coordinator and coordinator of construction projects as well. As Chris mentioned, I'm trained as an environmental engineer, and I've done some a lot of remediation sites and environmental work in the private sector before. So after Chris's presentation, if you have technical questions or any questions that I can answer, I'll be pleased to do so.
Okay, so my plan is to give you an idea of what spurred this whole initiative. We have announced that we are carbon neutral forever. And I think we've done some exceptional work, and we still have work to do. So I'll touch upon both of those.
Cue the applause.
Thank you. So you see an aerial photo of Dawson College. It's a sealed building. So we both air condition in the summer and heat in the winter. And Montreal geographically is fairly unique in that, being in the St. Lawrence Valley, we have these very warm summers and we have cold, very snowy winters. We're on about 12.5 acres of property on the island of Montreal. And the challenge is then, how do we bring, amongst other things, how do we bring our energy consumption down in a sealed building that has to be comfortable for 11,000 people and the occupants? We're also in a heritage building. You'll notice the sort of a chapel towards the top there. And this was a building that was built in 1910 by the Congregation Notre Dame, and the nuns stayed here for many years, over 100 almost. And then we took over that building. So that is our challenge. No green roofs at the time. A very old building in one sense that needed repair, yet was a heritage site. So it's a challenge. What we're trying to do is reconnect people, community, and nature, and we use the carbon neutral program to do that. And I'd just like to mention that this is certainly a negative slide, but it's an important reference in that, every ecological system on the planet is under stress. So we don't spend a lot of time on that. We simply say it's a reality. And the educational institutions have a responsibility here. If in fact what we've been teaching, and more importantly, implementing, has been right, the evaluation outside our windows should be different. So as an educator, I'm part of that system. And I think we had to question, does our building actually model what it is we teach in the classroom? And if not, why not? The two smaller slides are slides that are dear to us. As some of you know, 10 years ago, there was a tragic school shooting here. 16 people were shot. And that shook us to the core. So we use this slide to really indicate what has gone wrong. Is this well-being for all? And it led us to reflect as staff members and teachers what well-being for all is and what is the responsibility for an educational institution. And it is now a core part of our strategic plan. And I'm very proud to say that, so is sustainability. And announcing that we are carbon neutral and then working towards that is part of being meeting our core value of well-being. So we had a choice with that strategic plan, and we didn't have all the answers, but we were bold enough to put it into this 5-year vision. Over 1,500 students, or 1,600 students gave feedback, and over 300 staff members. And it was clear that it was time to change the way we not only teach, but particularly the way we implement what we teach. So we have this core value now through a living campus program, well-being for all, sustainably. And we challenge people to reflect on what that means in their departments and in the classroom. This is an example of a student we have that volunteered for our rooftop honeybee project. And she now works full-time putting honeybees on rooftops in Montreal. This slide really is the opposite of the one you saw earlier, and it is well-being for all as we define it. And I'm going to link this now into what we did with being carbon neutral. The lower picture on the right, the monarch butterfly, which we tag and we have for 4 years now, when they let this butterfly go and they've taken care of it as a caterpillar for almost a month, you can imagine the attachment, both in terms of students and staff. It brings them together, it builds conversations that we want and relationships. And then the questions start. Why are the flowers that we planted for the monarch already in seed? And it's just a perfect bridge to climate change. In fact, 2 years of the last 6, the very species that the adults need to have for nectar on their journey to Mexico, have started to grow too early in the spring. And they see here at Dawson in downtown Montreal the effects of climate change. And on the left-hand side, we now have a summer camp for underprivileged kids, as well as our staff. And we're taking temperature maps of our parking lots. So we're going to have our own heat island map, and we'll look at the importance of a tree, this living machine that helps air condition. So as much as possible, we're trying to make connections with people's experiences and through nature to show that, in fact, climate change is affecting these things. This is just a brief example of many projects that we have. I won't go through them all, but there's certainly one at about 7 o'clock, carbon neutral. If you continue on that circle to the left, you see rooftop gardens, biodiversity zones, field trips towards 2 o'clock. So we have many projects that engage people, and they all lead to us contributing, a good feeling that we're making a difference, and tying it into what in fact is happening to our environment. This is one large project, our Peace Garden, that we chose to construct after the shooting. And it also gives you an idea of the geographical situation. You saw the aerial view earlier, and this is our area of Montreal. So we're not only looking at trees, for example, as carbon sinks. There's another slide coming up, but we're also looking at them as living machines, as enrichment to curricula, a place where people can go and read. There's many reasons to plant a tree, for example, and we'll mention all of them, particularly the restorative aspect of nature. So this garden, a place to sit and relax and study with its trees, although it can be looked at a carbon sink, it's rather sterile to go through that. You can show the science, but what really works is to say, not only will we bring down greenhouse gases, for example, by increasing the number of trees, but it's an amazingly effective restorative agent. And less stress for staff and faculty equals more access to memory, more imagination, more creativity. And the literature clearly shows that. So we're selling the whole notion of being carbon neutral in many ways. It's a package, not only the science behind taking in greenhouse gases. And we're borrowing from positive psychology. People want activities that make them feel good, where they share positive emotions. So you'll notice that we use the term well-being quite a bit, and I have in this presentation. And there's a big difference in saying, would you like to be part of a well-being for all project, or would you like to be part of a sustainability project where we reduce carbon emissions? One really engages everyone regardless of who they are. The other one almost has academic connotations. And that's been really important for us to realize as well. So we want to use projects that build positive relationships, positive emotions, and have a sense of accomplishment. And when people are actually planting, for example, or they're reducing their waste, and we connect that to the methane in the dumps, they really feel they're contributing in a small way. So we take a complex issue like climate change, and we try to really identify in classroom or in sectors like finance or in plant and facilities ways that they can connect to this complex issue and make a difference. These are just some slides I'd like to show you, more so for the expression of the people that you see. This is an insect hotel that was created on the roof of our gym. And so we're giving back. We're trying to attract 100 species on the rooftop, and then the questions start. You know, how hot does it get on those bricks? Can we reduce the number of bricks on the rooftop? How does it affect the air conditioning load? As people start falling in love with the natural world, they start asking questions about what affects them. And here's just some of the photos that I think speak for themselves. So making that outside connection to what's really happening. You can imagine how many questions we had this year with the hurricane season when they realized that their butterflies are about 2,000 or 3,000 kilometers away. And in fact, a large hurricane that hit Florida or Texas is affecting the butterflies that we have here. So it makes climate change very personal. And there's a reason to walk up to the wastebasket and perhaps compost rather than just throw away. So we're trying to emphasize these types of relationships. We've attracted over 52 species now of birds on the property by planting trees, having gardens, and that also increases conversations and relationships and the expressions you see here as people feel good about bringing nature back into our community. This was a 100-year-old oak tree that we put on our gym roof. We have a natural area there, and there's a lock that was just put on it. And we're actually having students open it once a week, and it will be studied. So the carbon that's been trapped in there for over 100 years in the cellulose, the students are getting a great example of how the insects, the mushrooms, the invertebrates are taking that cellulose and releasing the carbon in different ways and making it available for the things growing around there. And we're doing this on a rooftop. And we just heard that our biology class that takes a field trip, 300 of them, so you can imagine whether that's a bus or public transport, the impact on the atmosphere. As of next year, that field trip is canceled because there's enough biodiversity on the rooftops that they can actually study what they need to. So here again is just the example in the heading that trees aren't just carbon sinks, but they're restorative agents. And in an institution like a hospital, in a daycare, or in our school as a college, this is really important for people to understand. The two go together. So we are combining when we try to convince people to release time and energy and money to become carbon neutral, we really emphasize that this is ecology and psychology coming together, that there's a restorative aspect and it truly is well-being for all. By reducing greenhouse gases, we feel better because we're contributing and feel we belong and are doing something that gives us a sense of accomplishment. We're helping other creatures, and we're building relationships amongst ourselves. So one of the things we do is we're planting trees in Nicaragua. We've cut our carbon emissions by 50% in 6 years about.
We're on the 7th year.
7th year. I believe it's actually closer to 60%. So we're very proud of what our plant and facilities team has done. And because we send a class to Nicaragua as a course, and we have a graduate who does tree planting on marginal land, we are planting trees through him in Nicaragua, and our students can go and visit that. And it's a social entrepreneurship project where we pay more per ton. And not only does it increase biodiversity on these marginal mountaintops, but it's done in such a way that they can start to select trees from the forest, and they've just opened up a carpentry shop, and the farmers are paid every month to keep the forest healthy. And in this particular project, the tree planting is the biggest single employer in the town. We're trying now to buy fair trade products from the material that is actually grown underneath the more mature forest. And we're trying to help them identify the biodiversity that's in there as well. This is our first attempt where we said we would do a pilot and we would become carbon neutral for 1 year in 2011. Gives you an idea of our emissions. So we were at 761 tons total emissions just for our energy. And we then had a class, 8 people decided to intercept all the garbage that 11,000 students produce in 1 day. And they took a semester to figure that out. Where does the garbage come from? What are the hygiene issues? Do we weigh it? Do we do it by volume? When does the garbage come? Who collects it? It was a really good project for them. And they were quite excited. And that's where we got our first data. We intercepted enough garbage to get a good sample of what we throw away. And the students, like the girl you see on the left, her takeaway from this was just how much absolutely untouched food was in the garbage. We looked at the plastic, the true garbage, and we came up with a number that was quite comparable. The landfill waste you see here under electricity and natural gas on the left. The compostables were about 1/3 of the garbage. Recyclables that should have been recycled was another 1/3. And the true garbage, as they declared it, contaminated material from foodstuff and things that couldn't be recycled, also 1/3. That year, Dawson produced 300, I think it was about 320 metric tons of garbage, but that included everything from our electronic waste. We included computers that we give to charity, but we still weigh them. The grease in our grease pit from the cafeteria. So we tried to look at all the garbage we actually sent to the landfill. We also looked at our travel. very interesting. We had never done that before. So we looked at expense accounts of everyone. There were privacy issues there that were quite important, and we solved that. And we simply noted literally every plane, taxi, hotel night that the staff used. And with Ecometrica here in Montreal, the company, they were able to do their research. So if there was a class trip to France, for example, and a couple to China, they would know how the energy is actually produced in China, or in Mexico, there was another trip, and they gave us these accurate numbers based on the way the energy was produced in the countries. So we had another 154 tons of CO2 and equivalents based on our travel that we added to our total. I'm just checking my time here. Okay. This is something I'd like to share. We stumbled on this, but it was very successful. We needed to raise $13,000 at $30 a ton that we selected to retire or offset our emissions. And we had an idea that people did not know what 914 tons of CO2 and equivalents was that we produced in that year. So we had mathematicians and students in an economics class, and we got the volume of every room in our plant and facilities department, the square footage, the square meters, and then we figured out what the volume of CO2 would be. What would 1 ton of CO2 look like at 20 degrees? And we realized that it would be twice the volume of the entire building, including 4 floors underground. That's what we vent into the atmosphere, and that made sense to people. And then we split it into actual volume per room, per hallway, for the library. And I'll just go through a couple of slides. This is by wing. And we put a price on it based on $30 a ton. And you could actually go up to these very large posters and say, I'm in room whatever, or I'd like to retire the CO2 from the library. And you could see how much it would cost. And we were really surprised. Not only did people want to actually sponsor their room, but the large pieces like gyms, libraries, people really were going for that. They got together with teams, collected money, and wanted to retire it. So for example, the very first line, our A wing, if you came up with $890, you could retire all the CO2 that the A wing could hold at $30 a ton. What was more important was this one. You can see the numbers on the last column, G, where you could take a very small area. If I look at number 19, the student workroom in a lab, somebody could say, yeah, you know, I'll pay $1.40 and retire that. And their name would go beside that square on public posters. And by validating people, it really took off. And we raised quite a bit of money doing this. And I would suggest it's something that can be repeated. This is just to give you an idea of all the indicators we're looking for. We have our academics on the left, various things we want to do. We're using the ASHI system, the STARS sustainability tracking and assessment rating system. So by being carbon neutral, it meets many things. There's public campaigns, there's education and courses, plant and facilities, of course, is involved with their energy providers. So we tick off various squares that you see in this rating system, and we're trying to get a gold level in the next couple of years. And the last couple of slides, this is the same one. So we want to go from this and not spend too much time on it, simply admit this is the problem, and why do we teach in the classrooms? Why do we have educational programs? And why is plant and facilities, finance, and administration helping us? Well, we want to get away from that. So we use the garden as our inspiration. Gardens celebrate diversity. They grow, they use local material, they recycle locally. And we talk about that as well here, that the garden that we planted as our answer to a very symbolic answer to the post-shooting trauma we had is now something we can also look at. It's an inspiration for us, and we want it to continue. And maybe that's the most important one. It's just to dream and say we're going to do it. And you know, education, we're guilty of always wanting the answers first and coming up with proposals. We don't have all the answers, but we've made a commitment through our strategic plan. And I think there's a really nice feeling here that with everyone's knowledge and skill, we can pull this off and have others look at us as a model and hopefully do even better. So that's my brief presentation. We're certainly open to specific questions or comments.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm applauding very loudly in my mind and in my heart. I really, really love what you guys have done. And I'm just going to give a brief presentation about how people can get involved in their community, and then we're going to jump into the questions. So okay. Folks on the line, there have been a number of questions already submitted, but if you have any others, the Q&A tab is where you can drop those. So here, we would like you from communities across the country to focus on your municipalities, get connected with other climate reality leaders and other climate activists in your municipalities. And instead of focusing on the big global problem that can seem overwhelming, have a look at your institutions, have a look at your households, have a look at your municipalities. So what we're proposing in this process essentially is between now and the end of the year, having these 20 groups set up across the country. Right now, there are 8 of them active, and we will be launching the other 12 between now and the end of December. You can sign up, of course, at climatehub.ca if you have not already. And the objective of these groups will be self-determined. So they will decide what are the projects that make the most sense for our reality. But the pieces that link them together are twofold. One being the desire to move their city along the 5-step benchmarking process established by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and that being measuring our emissions. Okay, the number one kind of step before we go anywhere else to solve a problem is to determine what are the kind of constituent elements of that problem. Number 2, putting a plan, setting a target to reduce those emissions, putting a plan in place to meet the target, implementing the plan, number 4, and number 5, recapping and saying, okay, how did we do looking back on the process? So that's what will rally these groups together. The other thing that will rally them, that draws them together, despite their diverse activities, will be this benchmarking process, whereby cities will, sort of like what Dawson is doing, benchmark themselves, and we'll be able to say, okay, for cities roughly the size of Saskatoon, what are the other cities in Canada? How are they, what's their building bylaw requirements for energy efficiency per square meter for new construction or for renovations? And we'll be able to say, here are 5 cities that are comparable, and we'll be able to start benchmarking ourselves across the country. So the first kind of beta test of that will happen in April of next year. We're really excited to get that going, and it'll totally be kind of citizen science, folks on the ground deciding that, we're going to ask our municipal councillor, we want to know what percentage of our waste is being diverted right now. We want to know how many kilometers of bike lanes were installed this year. We want to know whether public participation, and it's really cool what Dawson has done in that regard, the percentage of people that participated in the consultation process prior to the plan's implementation is very, very impressive. So we'd like to see that happening in other municipalities and to see the resources dedicated to making that happen. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand it over to question period. And if I can just stop my screen share, there we go. All right, so we've got a number here. So from Agnes, how can we get a figure for the CO2 emissions volume for our building? So how do we go about calculating that measure?
Well, what we did is we were told by one of the support staff in our plant and facilities department that they had the square footage of every room, and I would assume that's quite normal, right, somewhere. But they did not have the volume. They never had a sort of a reason to have the volume. So there was square footage for every room and hallways, and we estimated the rooms at 8 feet. And then we manually put in the larger ones like gyms and libraries. And that was supplied by the facilities department. And from there we had the students, I'll pretend I know what I'm talking about. They did the math for us, and it was double checked by somebody at McGill, and they were correct. And then it was just a matter of putting Excel formulas in there that would take the volume of the room once we had it, and then convert that to how much CO2 would fit in there on an average day of 20 degrees. I have all of those. I'm certainly willing to share them. But it's a great process for an economics class, a math class, a variety of classes. If you're in an educational institution, it's certainly authentic learning. And they felt so good that they were helping us with their research.
Terrific. Thanks so much. Another question, a little bit more technical perhaps. What scopes and emission sources are included in Dawson's carbon neutrality? So scope, you can just maybe say a word about what scopes are, and then what were offsets used to achieve carbon neutrality?
We did all of our energy, our waste, our transportation. We did not do, the one thing we didn't have to finish one scope level was the refrigerants. We had trouble finding that then, and we're working on that now. So if we do all of that, I believe we're at scope, is it scope 2 or 3? Someone would have to remind me. I know we were missing the refrigerants. That was difficult for us to get. And whether or not that's even recorded by different institutions is another issue. So I think that would be the first step, to make sure, in fact, if there are refrigerants used in any building and there's leakage, how much leakage and how is it replaced? And does somebody actually record it? What we found in other institutions we've worked with is they'll have a bill and they'll tell you why they billed you, but you have to backtrack in terms of the amount and the impact on the atmosphere. So one of the things we're doing now is being much more rigorous with our documentation, so it saves time in the future.
Okay, great. So in terms of scope 2, as I understand it, it's everything that that you produce, and scope 3 would be the things that you purchase, like textbooks or any other kind of product, the cleaning product of the, that the janitors would use, anything that's kind of purchased, furniture even, and that kind of thing. Yeah. Okay, so almost scope 2.
Actually, with refrigerants, I think we were at scope 2.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
We're not there, but we're doing all of our cleaning products are all compliant, and so we have a good 25-30% in purchasing. I believe that would be.
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine the cleaning contract here at Dawson, and as Vero said, we already have the green standard for that. Now we have to upload that into our system, to our database, to make sure that. We are going to continue that, and it's within the specs of the contract.
Okay. And do you want to say a word about offsets? Not sure if you...
Yeah, we reduced by about between 50-60%. And at the moment, what's left, we're choosing to offset with trees, not in Canada, although we had some amazing offers to do some replanting, to rehabilitate some streams, for example, salmon streams in British Columbia, and to do some work up here in northern Quebec. But because there's a Nicaragua component and there's many other social aspects to this as well, social entrepreneurship that meet curricular needs, we took advantage of that. And because a Dawson graduate was involved and loved what we were trying to do here, we managed to get a 50% reduction, not only for our payments here, but any staff member that wants to be personally carbon neutral, or any student has a 50% reduction as well. So we're going to be introducing that this year, that, give a present to a grandparent who has everything, but they're not carbon neutral. And I think that's going to be quite exciting. So we're collecting the photos we need to get people interested in what can happen.
Very cool.
Can I just add a comment outside of that question quickly? Véronique was just saying Municipality of, the Association of Canadian.
Fédération des Municipalités.
Oh, that's right. Federation of Canadian Municipalities sponsored her thesis work. And I work with them as well. And this might be interesting for the listeners. We were asked to create some carbon neutral projects for every province through education. So rather than accept money to go into a school, what we challenged every mayor of the provinces for is, we'll take care of kids in elementary school, and we'll show them how to do a very quick audit as to how your energy, how you're using energy, are you recycling or not? We'll do an audit of your own garbage can. And the media loved it. So imagine a grade 5 class that's prepped, and they walk into their city hall and they have their little badges on, and they do an audit of the mayor's room and the actual city hall. We got so much positive PR, authentic learning again. And we demand, and in a sense, we politely but firmly said, don't just fund a group and point away from your own building. Start with your own building. And it became a media story, which was really quite good. So I also challenge people to think out of the box, to get attention. and then move forward. And if you get students, particularly children, involved, it's pretty hard to say no to them. I've been told no for carbon neutrality projects and school boards, but when the students present, it's a whole different story.
Okay, yeah, I've seen that work, so I can vouch for that. And perhaps one final question. In terms of participant engagement, you guys did a very good job. What strategies did you, employ, and what kind of budget was required? And in addition to the people that you engaged during the consultation phase, how many people are engaged on a monthly or weekly basis?
The pilot in 2011, there's no way it could have been done, simply because it takes too much time without fieldwork students. So we had a one semester fieldwork student who would work 4 days a week on creating these awareness campaigns and developing the activities. We had people in finance involved, because if you gave more than $15, you got a charitable receipt. So that we had to arrange that. We didn't have any precedent for that in the past. And in terms of making decisions, it was that too has to be increased much more. We had a Sustainable Dawson steering committee of about 22 at the time. They were aware of it and endorsed it, but we didn't have any type of large consultations. Time and money at the time was an issue. So with the students' help, we drove it forward and we brought people together, and now we have a blueprint we can use. In terms of actually investing money, there was a lot of money invested. Maybe Véronique can just talk a little bit about what the facilities department went through to get us down to that 50% reduction level.
It was an investment of $6 million to retrofit a lot of the heating and cooling systems and lighting, different aspects of it. And this project was financed over 10 years. And every year we get a payback on the savings. So that's a big chunk, a big project.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, both of you, for joining us. I'm going to close it off here. So thanks, Chris and Véronique. We hope our listeners and those who will watch the video subsequently will come away with knowledge and inspiration to get active in your community, active in your institutions. And our next English webinar is Thursday, the 26th of October, next week, 2 o'clock Eastern, and we'll feature Andrew Duffield, as I mentioned earlier, the Sustainability Director for the town of Beaconsfield and architect of their plan to decrease landfill waste by 50%. So they achieved a 50% reduction in landfill waste at the scale of the whole town, which is approximately the same size as Dawson. I think we're talking about a town of 15 to 20,000. I'd have to check in on that, but about the same. And you can sign up, of course, for that webinar at climatehub.ca as well. So thanks again, Chris. Thanks again, Véronique. And for everybody else, we'll see you next week.
Okay, thank you.